Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors special meeting. Today is Monday, August 26th, and we will begin with the flag salute by me. Okay. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we're going to start off with our first item, our 1:30 item. County Executive is the 2024 Annual Eastern Placer Housing Update. Welcome, Stephanie. Doesn't sound like it.
There, how about now?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
We
Thank
can
you.
hear you now.
Well, good afternoon. Chair Jones, members of the board, Stephanie Holloway, your Deputy CEO. Glad to have you back. I feel like June was just yesterday, so it's been a couple months since you've been here. But things are busy as usual here in North Tahoe. We did have the Tahoe Summit this month, and so that was a really great opportunity for us to have some key conversations around transportation and a lot of innovation and discussion of our future for transportation. We're not going to talk transportation today, we're going to talk housing. So another huge priority for us in the region. And just, I think I wanted to open today and just mention to all of you, I think you're all aware, housing is really a critical conversation for us. Almost every conversation of every day, I feel like, has some element of a discussion around the need for housing. And so our team is here to give you an update on Eastern Placer housing initiatives, and then also a new initiative that we've been working on. So whether it's homelessness, low income, affordable, achievable, moderate, all these terms we've gotten very familiar with in the housing space. It is a complex conversation, but really what we're talking about is housing people in our community that serve our businesses, that provide us with support to provide sustainable communities. So a really valuable topic for your board, countywide, one of your critical success factors, but also really a critical program for us to be continued to be focused on here in Eastern Placer. So like I said, we do hear this concern on a regular basis. We are listening to those concerns and having conversations with the business community, our employers. We are a major employer in the region as well, and so we deal with many of the housing concerns. So today you're going to hear about a new initiative. We've been instrumental and innovative on some new programs, from Lease to Locals, support for the Lease to Locals program, our workforce housing preservation, new partnerships, and some new projects. I will also mention, really focus on building partnerships. There's a lot of partners here in the room around the housing space, working with TRPA on the regulatory side of housing regulation, as well as our Tahoe Basin Area Plan. Also, the Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Agency, which is a JPA of our public, some of our public employers in the region. We are one of those that I represent your board on that group as well. And then some private interests. A really key part of this discussion is the private businesses and private developers really focused on the need for housing. And so from ADUs to some of our bigger projects in the region, housing, new housing projects are really key. So, but without further ado, I just wanted to express how pleased I am with the housing team. The initiative that you're going to hear, not in this item, but the next item, but that initiative was brought forward from our community. Many of our community are looking for solutions. And so this initiative started with a discussion at the North Tahoe Community Alliance through the TOT grant program. With the help of with the housing team, they have put some parameters around this for you to consider today. So I'm really pleased with it. I hope you are too. I think the first item is mostly an update, but the second item we would welcome more of a workshop style. We'd love to get your feedback on that initiative. So with that, I'm going to hand this, I think, over to Gloria.
Hello.
Wow.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gloria Stearns, Economic Development and Housing. So here we go. We're going to start with like a broader view of looking at things, and then as we start to speak, we're going to narrow in a little bit more on this region, and then we'll narrow in on specific programs and updates. So hang on for the ride here today. Let's see. Do I have to point this There we go. All right. So I always like to start with a definition of economic development, and I'm doing that because our department is named Economic Development and Housing. And it was interesting because when we got merged, I was kind of confused as to why we might want to do that. But I figured there were minds greater than mine making those decisions. And as we've been going through this process for almost a year now, we can see exactly why that's happening. And as Stephanie mentioned earlier, there's a lot of overlap with how our businesses need to have housing for their employees, and especially up in this area. It's crucial. And we're starting to find certain discussions that we have that overlap. And of course, one of my favorite topics, Daniel's about to laugh when I say I hit people up for money all the time for economic development, but also for housing. So I think we can find a lot of different overlap with these two, and it's been a very successful merger of these departments. But just so we all have a common definition of economic development, and because I really like the underlined word there, I just want to remind everybody that it's the intentional practice of improving a community's economic well-being and quality of life. And I think intentional is a word that we ought to use with housing as well. I think we have to be able to think about what is the intent of what we're doing, what are the repercussions of what we're doing, and weigh all of those as we're making some of these decisions, and not just necessarily the first thing that knocks on our door in economic development or in housing, but what is the right thing? What is our intent as we're doing this? And be very intentional about the decisions that we're making. And of course, reminding you, you know this well as I do, the critical success factors for Placer County Board of Supervisors. One of those is outcomes-based economic development, so everything we do gets measured and looked at, as well as diversity of achievable housing throughout the county. Is there a delay? I'll get the hang of this. All right, so I'd like to start out with just some generic economic development facts for you. We have major employers throughout the county, and I tend to list our top 10 for you. You'll notice that there's a couple of clusters of them. Health, the health industry is obviously our largest. Government is a next large cluster, so you'll see Placer County, City of Roseville, school districts in there, Sierra College in there, the casino is a large employer, and then others as well. And I say this because over here, we have our listing of the sizes of some of these industries. And I mention these sizes because if you add up all of these numbers, you get close to around 100,000 people working in some of these industries. And that's going to become important in just a minute here. I like to look at the median household income. We recently updated these slides, and our new median household income for Placer County is $112,000. And currently, if you do some math and you look at what is actually affordable, and by that we mean people not spending more than 30% of their income on housing and housing-related expenses, renters in Placer County right now would need to make $42 an hour. And if you recall, the last time that I did this speech, before I had updated it, I told everybody, remember the number 37. If you remember just one thing, it was 37. So in 2 years, that number has gone from 37 to now 42. So that's, yes, that's a wow thing, right? So we have to work on this, and that's why it's so important to get this average rent. Now, remember when I had you just recall a few minutes ago when we looked at our industries and I said all of those add up to about 100,000 people? There's about 400, just over 400,000 people in Placer County. That means that 1 out of 4 people in this room are rent constrained. So when you're having public meetings or when you're walking through the grocery store, I want you to remember that some of these people are having problems paying their bills. And that's why this is such a key problem and a key issue, and something that we really have to take the time to look at solving and be creative in our solutions. And this is so important for us. All right, so exemplum is a very fancy word that means a story with a lesson. But basically, it's really a way that I get to tell you a story about my crazy kayaking friends. And I recommend everybody have crazy kayaking friends because they do make your life a little bit more interesting. So today we're going to talk about the similarities between kayaking over a waterfall and economic development. So I'm going to tell you a story, and this is true. My crazy kayaking friends, and they're back in Wisconsin, so they don't have like wildness is as big as it is out here in California. Wisconsin is like, that's the beginner level of kayaking, and that's the beginner level of nature. So out here in the Tahoe area, when you find your waterfalls and you go waterfalling, these kayakers will tell you, you go over the waterfall, and yeah, you're trying your best to stay upright, and you're screaming, you know, let's face it, you are. And you're trying to stay, you know, solid in your position. You've kind of scoped out where you want to land, and you hope you get there, and you land into this big pool of water, and it's swirling around, and it's swirling around, and then all of a sudden they're swirling around, and it's just like all of a sudden it just pops you out, bing, and you go flying. And that's when they have the biggest grins on their faces, because to them, that's fun. So I thought about that, and I thought, that pretty much describes my job almost every day. I don't think HR knows that yet, but it really does. And it's like, how do we make this analogy and this story fit throughout today? So we're going to keep revisiting this concept of my crazy kayaking friends.
Gloria,
Excuse me, Gloria.
Can I break a minute?
Can you go back to that slide? First of all, thank you for making me look up, what's it called, explain them?
Exemplum.
Exemplum. Thank you for that. So I'm glad you explained that for me. It makes it a little bit clearer, and I look forward to the rest of the presentation to maybe make it even more clear for me. So thank you.
And I chose this photo intentionally. It's a little fuzzy. It's not the clearest one, but the clearest ones have sponsors, and they're fancy, and they do this professionally. This is a photo of a guy going down his first waterfalls, and he posted this. So this is just some guy out there doing his first waterfall. So I thought that was an important thing to see too. So I took this idea of these pools of water, and I used that analogy as I started looking at things. And if we start out with all of us, all of the people that Stephanie mentioned, it takes a village to do this housing stuff, right? So it takes our nonprofit friends, our private businesses, government at all different levels. And we all invest. So we have this pool of water that we start with. And out of that pool of water, we can see new businesses develop. And then we have existing businesses starting to grow. Our entrepreneurs get stronger, and they grow too. Infrastructure, we know when we build infrastructure, we do tend to see it. If you build it, they do come, we know that. And then workforce housing coming out of these. But wait, all of these in turn generate more investments. So it kind of reminded me of this kayaker going over, the waterfall. More investments come out of the new business development. As our existing businesses grow bigger, they tend to reinvest in things. As our infrastructure grows, we know we have to make the pipes bigger. We know we might have to make a bigger roadway. These things just continue to circle through a little bit. And out of some of these other investments, we see parks and trails and first responders and nonprofits and art and workforce development. And I don't put these in any order of priority, or I don't put any judgment with these. It's just where it fit on my slide, just to kind of show you that it all keeps going. And these investments in parks and trails continue to keep doing this. We just ran out of room, and Miranda could only fit so many things on a slide. So thank you, Miranda, for doing all of these. But if things go away, or if things get smaller, if we decide not to be all in, if we make smaller investment choices, or maybe our partners aren't in with us, we have less investment coming in, and you can kind of see other things go away. So maybe we only have our existing businesses. Maybe we get just entrepreneurs at that point. We might not get the big new businesses. And out of those lesser quantities of new things that we're getting, you get lesser returns for investments. So it's almost like a cycle of people continuing a downstream impacts of not investing. And we start to lose things. And then when you start to lose your parks and trails, or maintenance for those, or art or workforce development, things start to fall off. So you want to make sure that your investment pools stay strong. So I like to end on a strong slide, so I remind you here of this is why it's important to be doing these continued investments. So that way we can see continued downstream impacts. And I think a lot of that is important, because some people say, well, what if we just stop investing in this one little piece over here? They're all connected. You know this, I know this. I think it's important for us to keep doing these investments, so that way we can show the people who need housing, those 1 out of 4 people in Placer County who need housing, we need to keep showing them these investments, that we care. So with that, I'm ready to turn it over, and I believe Nikki is up next.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon, Nikki.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Jones, members of the board. Good afternoon, Supervisor Jones, members of the board. Nikki Stregan with the Economic Development and Housing Group, and your housing manager and principal planner. I am also joined by Tim Cusson, our Tahoe housing specialist, who's going to be presenting parts of this presentation and the next. And then you can see in the room some additional housing staff that I want to introduce. Marie Maniscalco, our new housing development project planner, and Darius Brown, our housing specialist on the west side of the county.
Welcome, everyone.
So we wanted to provide this update. Let me skip here to my proper slide here. First and foremost, thanking Gloria for that context, and also acknowledging a lot of the collaboration that's happening across internal departments, as well as external partners, many of whom are in the room today. Our partners obviously include Health and Human Services, facilities. I believe Paul Breckenridge is in the room. CEDRA plays a very big role in this, including our partners with the Long Range Planning Division, CEDRA Tahoe. I want to call out Emily Setzer put some of these data slides and demographic slides together for us, some of the background data, so call her out. She's not able to be here with us today. But just acknowledge that level of collaboration that's going to take to do the work that we need to do on housing. I'm going to provide, obviously, an overview of housing needs. We're going to talk a little bit about some program updates, and we'll talk a little bit about upcoming initiatives also. So looking at the slide here on the screen, this is just a snapshot of demographic information here at the county. On the east side of the county, I should say, there's approximately 12,000 residents here with an average household size of 3. Gloria had pinpointed a median income. That was a county-wide median income, and the figure that you see on the screen is actually the median income for East Placer when we look at the very specific census tracts on the east side of the county. That's different than the area median income that we look at through HCD, that's the California Department of Housing and Community Development, income limits that they publish and update every year. So based on that, we're seeing higher incomes on the east side of the county, just, acknowledging that there's a little bit of a difference there.
Do you have that number, Nikki?
Countywide, it's $102,500.
Okay.
This is based on an average household size of 3. It's closer to $113,000 for an average household size of 4. Just for good frame of reference.
Well, I guess I'm confused because it says Placer County 112 is the median income. What's East Placer?
This is our East Placer figure.
So
and if you're looking back to Gloria's slide,
oh, it's $400 more.
yeah. If you're looking back to Gloria's slide, hers is derived from another source, ESRI, for economic development purposes, housing, and the limitations that we use to charge rent and calculate maximum incomes is also different. It's a different methodology. Takeaway here is a little bit higher incomes on the east side of the county. That's kind of what we're finding.
Just don't have a number.
Okay. And then here we're looking at average home rental and median home sales. Average home rental is $2,585 per month. Median home sales right now are $1.3 million for a single family home. This figure is probably one that you have seen in the past. It's from the Mountain Housing Council's Regional Housing Needs Assessment. This is a 2013 update that was done last summer, updating 2016 information. The geography that we're talking about here is the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District. That's what this data is relevant to, and that includes the town of Truckee, unincorporated Nevada County, and Placer County. So on the east side of the county, we're looking at a shortfall of 8,197 units, and that's comprised of these 4 buckets right here along the bottom. So 4,180 of those units are current workers who are inadequately housed. And what we mean by inadequately housed is that they're paying too much. They're paying over 30% of their income monthly to afford rent, or the conditions of the home, maybe the plumbing and kitchen facilities aren't adequate. 2,485 of those units are in-commuters. So those are individuals who are coming from outside of the region. It might be Carson City or Reno or Verdi, or it could even be Meadow Vista or Colfax that are coming into this part of the county to work and can't otherwise be housed here. 1,444 are seasonal workers, so those are part-time workers who are inadequately housed, and then 88 are homeless individuals who are lacking housing entirely. When we look at the average cost of rent, I had mentioned on that prior slide, it's $2,585. Again, slightly higher than the number that you saw in Gloria's slides because we've pinpointed this number through our Lease to Locals program. Thank you, Placemates, for providing this information. So for participants in that program, that's the average that we've identified. And again, you can see, similar to the description that Gloria had provided, the amount that someone needs to make in order to afford that rent is $49 per hour, or bring in $8,600 per month. Now, that isn't to say that a combination of a few of these tenants could be working these jobs, but you can see some of the shortfalls here. So California minimum wage is $16 an hour right now. The following four positions, the retail salesperson, medical assistant, home health and personal care aide, and teacher, these are all from job descriptions that are currently posted here in the county today, on the east side of the county today. So you can see some of those shortfalls as we get into a combination of having maybe a teacher working, a teacher living in a household, or teacher and a medical assistant. That becomes more realistic, but you can see that they're not quite meeting this $49 per hour threshold. And when we take a look at home ownership costs, this shows a sliding scale from 2018 all the way to today, January 2024. The data showing the median sales price from 2018, so that's $628,000 was the median sales price 6 years ago. That could be afforded by a 3-person household bringing in $166,000, or at 230% AMI. In 2018, but today the median sales home price is $1.35 million, and so that means a 3-person household needs to be making $359,000 and make at 350% of our area median income. And so that's obviously and error here, 3-person household is actually making $112,000, but still that is a large shortfall to show that the average household can't afford to buy a home by a very large margin in this side of the county. There are almost 19,000 total housing units on the east side of the county, and this slide is showing how they are occupied. So 55% of them are vacant. 18% of them are a part of our short-term rental program that's run through CEDRA. And then the other approximate quarter is owner occupied or it's long-term rented. Of that sort of quarter of the pie here, 227 of those units are deed restricted through either our workforce housing preservation program or through an affordable housing development. And that comprises 1% of that total 19,000 figure as far as housing stock. This slide shows the unit need that is out there by type. So the orange color we can kind of simplify and call low income. That's up to 80% of the area median income. The blue color is between 80 and 195, so moderate middle income. And then over 195 is the darker red color. And here you can see in the orange color, right, low income families have great need for studio 1 and 2 bedroom households. And the teal color, that's 80 to 195%, so moderate income and slightly above moderate income, have a need for 1 and 2 bedroom households. So this is all to say that future needs and whatever we create on this side of the county looking forward has to match future development and whatever we create looking forward has to match this need. When we take a look at ADU development, which are an important part of this sort of pie of housing product types that should be developed as part of the solution, we see 10 ADUs have been built in Placer County since 2019. That is very different from the west side of the county where we see more like 80 to 100 units being built, 80 to 100 permits being pulled per year for ADUs. On this side of the county, 25 ADUs have been Total permits have been issued, 14 of those in the basin, and the cost to build is higher than we would see on the west side of the county, closer to $500,000 to $800,000 per unit, depending on a number of factors. Understandably, we're contending with a few different things in the Tahoe Basin, certain environmental regulations toward coverage, as well as different building regulations, things like snow load requirements and those kinds of things drive the cost of ADUs up. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of our programs, and I'm going to invite Tim Cusson up to speak about our Workforce Housing Preservation Program and the Lease to Locals program.
Good afternoon, supervisors. Tim Cusson, Tahoe Housing Specialist, here with a few program updates for you. Our first one is our Workforce Housing Preservation Program, or WIP as it's affectionately known. This is a home buyer program that will give home buyers up to 16% of a purchase price to purchase a home in eastern Placer County. This program was launched in 2021. It went through a brief pause from August 23 through April of this year while we updated the program guidelines and loan documents. Currently, we have 45 households that have been qualified to use the program and are out actively looking for property. Since the unpausing in April, we have run 2 online buyer education webinars, one of which is available on our website as a recording, and 1 lender education webinar. Currently, to date, we have 9 deed-restricted properties in this program. Those 9 properties, 8 of them are single-family homes, which were purchased for between $515,000 and $980,000. We also had 1 condo purchased for $405,000. Since our April unpausing, we have added 2 new purchases to the program. We also have 1 that is in process and approved, scheduled to close in early September. The average disbursement of the grants that we've provided is $114,177. Currently, as of our monitoring cycle in 2024, 100% of these properties are owner-occupied as a primary residence. And to date, 0 properties have been listed or resold. The program is funded with $3 million of TOT funds through fiscal year 2025-26. We also are here with an annual update on our, on our Lease to Locals program. This is a program that provides homeowners incentives to give long-term or seasonal renting a try when they have not been doing that in the past. So kind of a behavior-changing program. This program was launched in August of 2022. As we got rolling, we had 34 properties participate in year 1. We've just recently completed year 2, where we added another 48. So a total of 82 properties and counting. Of the 82 properties, 60 of them participated as long-term rentals, and we had 22 participate as seasonal leases. Over 60% of the properties were distributed between 2 and 3 bedroom units, followed closely by 17% 1-bedroom units, and then 4 bedrooms, studios, and rooms in shared homes. So the whole point of the program is retention. We're trying to create a behavior change, show people the merits of renting their homes long-term to the local workforce. And of the 82 properties, we've had 49 graduate, meaning that they've completed the initial lease term. And when we set out, we were hoping for 60 to 65% retention rate, and so far we are seeing 76% of those properties that have graduated continue renting. A bulk of them, 28 of these have rented to the same tenants, and 9 have rented to new tenants. So we're seeing some good retention through the program. I'll run through some stats of the program. So far to date, $839,250 have been committed in incentives. The average incentive per property is $10,235. One thing to note, in December of 2023, we did update the program guidelines and reduce the incentive amounts per property, so hoping to spread those dollars a little bit further moving forward. When you break it out by per bedroom, the average incentive is $4,512. The program guidelines do have a cap on the rent that can be charged at $3,500 per month. However, that average rent we are seeing charged in the program is far lower than that, which is great to see, at $2,585 per month. When you break that down a little further, average rent per bedroom, $1,140. So far, the program has housed a total of 192 people, 152 of those being members of the local workforce, as well as 29 children. The annual household income of the participating tenants is $116,365, with the average adult income at $64,406. And with that, I'll kick it back to Nikki.
Thanks, Tim. So I'll wrap up these next couple of slides here just with a few project updates and a little bit of an update on some other initiatives we're doing. So the projects before you, one of course is Hopkins Village. That's a 40-unit for-sale development for local worker households earning 180% of the area median income. 7 units of that development remain available for local workers or for employers to purchase. These have their certificate of occupancy. They're currently listed for sale. Tim has been working really hard on this particular development in order to get those last few units sold. But we just wanted to make a note to the community here today that there are 7 units remaining, and that employers, there's a provision in the agreement that we have that allows employers to purchase these units also for their employees. The next proposed project that we wanted to touch on is Dollar Creek Crossing. Currently, staff is analyzing the financial feasibility of this development and some paths to move forward. We know that the community is very interested in hearing what's happening on this particular property. The affordability mix that had currently been workshopped with the community includes a mix of incomes. Of course, you've seen that there is a spectrum of need that we need to address and house throughout not only the county, but the east side of the county. And so that affordability mix right now is proposed to include affordable rentals, which would be for those making 80% of the area median income and below, so low income, and also achievable rentals and achievable for sale. Now keep in mind the term achievable in this part of your region means those who are making 120% of the area median income, or someone who is a local worker. And that, of course, is someone who works an average of 30 weeks in the Tahoe-Truckee Unified School District for an employer who has a principal place of business in that same district area. So there's a rental component to that as well as a for sale component to that. Again, we're doing a lot of analysis right now to bring forward a subsequent item to your board this fall where we will bring that back in front of the board. Just some noted here on this third bullet point, some project history. There have been contributions to this project for the property purchase. The contributions have been made from the Tahoe-Truckee Airport District as well as from the Housing Trust Fund. That's our fund of fees we collect in lieu of construction. And then other contributions from transient occupancy tax dollars and the Permanent Local Housing Allocation, or PLHA. That is an HCD, or a State Department of Housing and Community Development funding source. Again, we look forward to returning to your board this fall to talk a lot more about that item. And another initiative we're really looking forward to is a housing action plan. So this is a county-wide effort to acknowledge this really pivotal place we're at, and I think Gloria alluded to that when she introduced this whole presentation. This action plan is aimed at looking at and acknowledging the work we've done to date. It's going to draw from the body of work that we already have done, including the programs that are identified in the housing element. And then it's going to set measurable outcomes to strive for in the next 4 years. And those might include some of these things that we are already doing, but we want to do more of. And you can see on the right side of the slide, these items kind of highlighted in green address new construction. That's most certainly a goal that we're gonna look at, creating new units. So that might be done through the private development community, through developer obligations, through incentive programs, or other programs that support the creation of ADUs. But that might also be done through public projects. Things that are done, developments that are done on county-owned land, or development through the Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Agency that they take upon themselves to initiate, to create new units. Managing existing units and preserving the existing stock we have, we already run, again, some programs like this, like the Workforce Housing Preservation Program, where we're protecting and preserving existing single-family homes on this side of the county for local workers. The Lease to Locals program is yet another way of doing that, by converting short-term rentals over to long-term rentals by using existing housing stock. There may also be some vision for acquiring and rehabilitating existing properties that might be ripe and ready for affordable and workforce housing. So we are at the beginning, 1/3 of that work effort, working together again with CEDRA. Emily Setzer and I are at the helm of that project. We'll be conducting some facilitations with existing partners in the next 1 to 2 months. External partners in the next 1 to 2 months, and then plan to bring that plan forward to your board before the end of the year. And last but not least, we'll just touch on the partners, many of whom are in the room, and I apologize to the Placemate staff, your logo is not on here, but I want to call you out. You are, there was a series of slides that were branded just for you, from you. So, but their logo, of course, is missing from this slide. They are a partner in our Lease to Locals program. But none of this work could be done without the prior and previous efforts of a lot of the organizations on this slide, and the efforts to come from a lot of the organizations that are on this slide. You'll hear from several of these organizations during the public comment period, but we're looking forward to continuing our relationship with a lot of these organizations, including the Tahoe Truckee Workforce Housing Agency, who's been doing a lot of footwork to expand their existing housing programs. They're looking more at housing development opportunities, and potentially launching a new nonprofit workforce housing fund to leverage public and private dollars. The North Tahoe Community Alliance has been vetting quite a few of the projects that have been funded through TOT dollars, and of course they're a critical player. And then the Tahoe Living Working Group, that is a group of a multi-jurisdictional group that is facilitated through the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, that will be looking forward to a third series of amendments to the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency's Code of Ordinances, and again, with a focus on housing and a lens for allowing more housing at affordable and workforce levels to be developed in the basin. So with that, I'll conclude our presentation. We're happy to take questions on this presentation before we begin the next one, workshopping the Launchpad program. Oh, I'm sorry. Back to you, actually. There's a, back to you.
It's nice to know I matter, Nikki.
Sorry,
All right.
sorry. Yeah.
So we go back
Thank
to,
you, Nikki.
I love her. We go back to our exemplum, and that's how we're going to kind of wrap things up. We started down this journey, and our exemplum means we're having our lessons learned at this point. So what did we actually learn here? We know that housing is challenging. We have to adapt as situations change, much like our kayaking friends, and change is continual. We know that all types of housing are important. There's going to be no single magic bullet here. There's going to be no one single solution. We have to do it all. Programs that help renters, homeowners, as well as building large and small housing solutions are all going to be important. And to do this, it requires collaboration. That guy is not getting down that waterfall by himself. Believe me, his buddies are there watching him. There's another guy filming him, and there's a couple ready to fish him out if he needs to. You need to have your friends with you when you're on some of these journeys, and housing is certainly that, as well as our kayaking friend. So everybody who has to work together and collaborate on this effort. So because in the end, much like it is for him and for our kayaking friends, housing is so worth it. So now we can conclude, and our team is here for your questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'll bring it to the board for questions. Supervisor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. On slide 13, you talk about housing occupancy, and there's 55% vacant. Is that second homeowners, or what, that's what that is?
They're unoccupied. And yes, I'm gonna go back to this slide here.
All right.
Meaning they're not occupied full-time,
Yeah.
correct? So they can be second homeowners.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. I've been wrong before.
Okay, Supervisor Gustafson.
Thank you, and great presentation. I loved the analogy of kayaking, and just want to know where that waterfall is. And if that was my first try, I think that's a little crazy, but you have crazy friends, huh? The slide 12, we hear a lot in the community and at TRPA meetings with questions about why we haven't put an upper cap, just the housing location of employment as, you know, for the top group, based on a lot of our programs, like our workforce housing program, that we don't have that upper cap. And I just want to continue to get this out to the public about why, because what would we set the number at? 350% of AMI? I think that's the challenge, as we continue to see our housing stock prices going up quicker and the cost of construction going up more, that having that locally based employment is a better tool than trying to set an AMI that we may have to change next year or the year after as these numbers continue. I just wanted to point that out to the other board, because we hear that a lot. Why do we not have an upper cap and based on AMI? And this is why, when you see the disparity between what people can purchase in a home and their incomes. So having that locally based employment seems to be the better method. But I continue to be open. I've asked people, well, what cap would we put on it? You know, if you want a cap, what would be the number? And this is really indicative of how high it would have to be to accommodate that. On slide 14, this is people that are currently working in our region. What I don't think, in talking to business owners, even our county staff, when they're trying to recruit people, it doesn't account for the people who don't see any future in buying a home here, so they don't even apply for the jobs, or they move on. And I see that in private business, I see it in government services. I hear these stories of people will post a job and people look at housing prices and they just don't even apply. So even though I know that number is frightening to all of us to think about 8,200 more units, it doesn't account for that variety of units we need to entice people to come here and fill some of our jobs. And so I wanted to remind that, because these numbers are based on inadequately housed and who's already working here.
Can I just add on to that, which I appreciate you pointing that out, because that almost 8,200 units needed are already people working here. They're already working here, and they're either commuting or they're living, you know, a family of 4 in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I think it's really important to know those are people that are currently working and really cannot afford to be anywhere close to their jobs. And we all appreciate having an opportunity, if you have an opportunity to live close to where you work. That's a quality of life issue. And so folks who work here are missing out on that quality of life when they're having to commute back and forth.
Yeah, I think Gloria would agree. Attracting and retaining are also, you know, part of the puzzle here.
Right. And then on slide 17, I had a question, might be for Nick, on lender issues. Have we seen issues with lenders not understanding the Workforce Housing Preservation Program and being reluctant to lend? Or I mean, obviously, we've sold a lot of these units, but has it been you mentioned you'd had a lender workshop, but I'm interested if any lenders have found it unique and therefore challenging to lend.
So lenders need to approve the program for their use through their compliance departments. We are happy to work with any lenders. One of the reasons that the program was paused and part of our loan document cleanup package was to remove some of the barriers that lenders were finding in that package. And I believe initially, in our initial rollout, there were only 3 lenders that had approved the program for lending. They were all local, so did have some investment in the area. Since the unpausing and the cleanup of those loan documents, we have twice as many. Typically, since there is a process to go through, get your compliance team to review, banks that are not invested in this area typically won't go through that just for a one-off transaction. So most of the lenders that we do have approved are local, some of our local loan officers.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the efforts to help people explain to their lenders what this program is and how it is beneficial. And then, Nikki, I think the last question is for you on slide 25. I may have missed it. It sounded like on Dollar Creek Crossing, you said 80 and below, 80% of AMI and below, and 120% and above. So it seemed like there was a gap between the 80 and the 120. Did I miss a category?
120% or below,
Or below?
or
Okay.
below,
Okay,
or a local worker. That's how you define achievable in this region.
okay. I'm confused by that because I thought achievable included above 120.
The local worker provision is what trips you over 120.
Okay.
You don't need to be making under 120 so long as you meet a local worker definition. So it's
Okay.
120% below or a
Or
local
that,
worker.
okay.
Right.
Great, so there isn't a gap. Sorry, I was writing down my notes and I thought I had a gap.
Sure.
Thank you, those were my only questions.
Supervisor Gore.
Thank you. I just, no questions. I just wanted to say what a great job on the lease to locals, because we really didn't know if it would be effective. So great job, right? Like it's, and the part that makes me really happy is we actually have tenants who got in and then their leases are continuing. So that's just really terrific. And I know it was a little bit of a challenge thinking, will this work? But I'm really glad it's made an impact.
Supervisor Landon.
Thanks. I will echo what she just said, and then I have a question on slide 15 on the ADUs. I just was wondering, I'm assuming the lack of permits issued is because of the difficulties in getting something constructed in the basin, but I just wanted to clarify. So is there a desire out there by people, like are there more people coming forward saying we would love to do an ADU, but because of the cost and because of the regulations, we just can't? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, and you might hear some of our partners speak to this particular topic, but I think between environmental requirements, the regulation, and then additional cost to build with some of the building permit requirements, building code requirements, those kinds of the things are barriers on this side of the county, because we see so many on the west side of the county. Configured, like lot sizes, there's a lot of other constraints, I think, on this side.
And is that something, I'm sure that's a conversation that's kind of happening, but is there any low-hanging fruit when it comes to those things about what could be done to kind of help that process for some of those folks?
Sure. So we continually have conversations, and in fact, I'm having one tomorrow with one of our partners in the prefab ADU. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about with him is snow load, because I don't know if his current model does the proper snow load, but if it doesn't, that's the conversation, and say, we need you to do this. And if they're willing to start doing some of these prefabs that can hold the snow load and meet the engineering needs, we might find a way to do some of these units quicker.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and I would ask, what or how can you handle people who want to build an ADU for housing or those who want to build an ADU for the purposes of short-term rental?
I might reserve that question for we can get back to you on that because Cedra Tahoe can probably best answer that question. There are some specific rules and requirements on this side of the county, but I'd prefer to hold that for.
Okay, all right.
And consult with Cedra. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to open it up for the public. Anyone like to come up and make comments or ask questions? Come on up. Mhm. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia. I'm a homeowner here in Kings Beach that has been trying to house locals or workers. A couple questions. First, ADU cannot be a short-term rental as of the last changes of your STR. So if you stay on top of that, that was the recent change you guys just approved. The other element is with vacancy, is it I saw the source. Is it possible from like a tax perspective to really understand the number of primary residents that are actually living in the Eastern Tahoe Basin so that that could be cross-referenced to like the second homeowners and the vacancy? Because I feel like every number is different, but that is what we're held against to is that primary residency. The other question I have is, in the housing needs, I actually think the number is greater and that the seasonal worker is underrepresented. So I was wondering if from a tax perspective, if you are able to learn how many J1s and H2Bs are coming in each season, which will actually reflect the season of winter and summer, because that would be a lot different. And then also, is there a way to really look at how many residents are here not working in our county? Because I know the primary residences in like Incline will tell all their workers to live in Kings Beach and other areas where it's less expensive. So I'd really be curious. I know that you guys were talking a little bit about Truckee, that is not within our county, but we have so many individuals that are not within our county, and it's a unique compared to the rest of the county because the state line is just less than a mile away. And so I really will ask you guys to kind of think of the persona of the seasonal worker and is that represented properly, as well as these other workers that we're housing from the other states and how that could be looked at in programs around that, because it's displacing people that are trying to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones, members of the board. Erin Casey here with the Tahoe Housing Hub, hopefully another housing organization that will be a partner to Placer County in the coming weeks to years. We are a new nonprofit corporation, and we are focused on making sure that there is housing that is accessible and available to all members of our community. I want to save some time for Carolina Scarsha, who will come up after me, to talk with you about our ADU Accelerator program. I think that might shed some light on some of your questions, particularly yours, Supervisor Landon, regarding ADUs. But what I wanted to do was just actually share a little bit about my own personal housing story, because I think that at times it's difficult for members of the workforce to come to these meetings, right? We don't always see them here to share their personal stories because they're working, trying to make ends meet and support their families. So I'd just like to share a little bit about my own experience. My daughter just graduated from Truckee High this past June, yay, and is now off to UNR. But that experience has given me the opportunity to really reflect on my life, parenting her in the last 18 years, which has taken place almost exclusively in the North Lake Tahoe region. Liv was born in 2006 at Tahoe Forest Hospital in Truckee, and my now ex-husband and I had moved here in 2003. We were actually married out in Olympic Valley at Gramps, if you know where that restaurant is. And we were able to find housing early on, but for me, what became really challenging is around the time in 2013 where my marriage, we're no longer together. I was a single mom, found myself on a single income, trying to find a place to live in Truckee. In 2014, I found a studio apartment, Tahoe Donner. I moved in there with my daughter. We lived there for about a year. And then we were able to move into a home that had 2 bedrooms, a little bit more space for us. And we stayed there for 5 years. This was over by Safeway in Truckee. A lot of local residents live in that community. And I was one of the lucky ones at that time, I will say. My rent was somewhat manageable, but it was one of the few places in Truckee where I could afford it. And I was already, and affording for me was actually spending more than 30% of my income. It was something that still allowed me most times to be able to provide food, pay for utilities, pay for my car, all the other things that many people have to deal with. But in order to really make ends meet, at the time I was working for a nonprofit organization. I was working on nonprofit wages. I also babysat on evenings and weekends and did other side jobs to make ends meet. Despite that, during that period of time in my life, I lived in constant fear of losing my housing. Constant fear. I don't have family in this area. There were no safety nets for me. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take another minute if that's okay, given the, okay, thank you. And it was a very difficult time. I was also afraid of my car breaking down. Any kind of unplanned expense was something that was always present in my mind. During this time, I also tolerated a lot from my landlord. This person would make unannounced visits, invading our privacy. I came home for a period of time. There would be, for whatever reason, ants had crawled into the house and were dying in a certain area in the living room. So I'm coming home with my child who's in elementary school, walking into a home with dead bugs in the corner, and I felt like a failure as a parent. And my landlord refused to pay for the cost to have somebody come in and treat that particular issue, so I paid for it myself. And I tolerated all this for 5 years because I was so afraid that if I left that unit, I would not be able to afford it, and I would have to figure out where to live. And being in the situation that I was with my child's father living in our community, that was not quite the option that it would have been if my circumstances had been different. Since that time, things have improved in my life, and I'm very fortunate in that way. But when I reflect on my experience of being a parent in our region, it was very hard, and it was impacted significantly by the stress that I experienced in trying to provide housing, among all of the other things that a parent wants to make sure that you have for your child. I'm grateful to this community, and I'm glad that I was able to raise my daughter here. I feel fortunate for having that opportunity. So don't mistake my comments for, especially those in the room who love this area as much as I do. It's more to share some of the challenging sides of trying to make ends meet. And those of us who are paid to do some of this work may also care very deeply about this work and may have real life experiences of struggle, of challenge that motivate them. And I can tell you from my own experience that that's why I'm here. That's why I'm working on housing, and that is why I have become the CEO of the Tahoe Housing Hub, because I want to help people like that in our community. Thank you for the extra time, Chair Jones. I deeply appreciate it. And with that, I do want to quickly introduce Carolina Scarsha, who is our new Housing Development Project Manager, to talk with you about the ADU Accelerator. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you, Erin, for sharing that with all of us. I'm Carolina Scarsha. I'm the Housing Development Manager for the Tahoe Housing Hub, and I'm here to provide an overview of our ADU Accelerator pilot program, the services we offer, and what we've learned so far. The ADU Accelerator program was developed to increase housing for the workforce. And as staff pointed out today, we will need a variety of options if we want to start closing the gap on those 8,200 unit number that are needing housing at the moment. However, the benefits of these units, they extend beyond the need for workforce housing. They allow homeowners to optimize their properties by generating additional long-term income, increasing property value, supporting housing needs for family members, and opportunities for aging in place. It is also a way to achieve all these options without changing the character of our residential neighborhoods. We've begun a beta test phase of the program where we're working with a select group of homeowners to refine and adjust the program. Our goal is to support the homeowners throughout the process, providing technical assistance at no cost, which was made possible by grants from the North Tahoe Community Alliance and the Martis Fund. And the support will span from preliminary feasibility to navigating local regulations, securing financing, managing construction, and offering rental support. So far, since mid-July, I've engaged with 12 homeowners in the North Lake Tahoe region, and these initial conversations have provided valuable insights into how we can best support them and have highlighted the main barriers they face when considering this type of project. The main challenges include understanding local regulations, securing financing, forecasting construction costs, and access to funding. Of these, the total project cost has emerged as the most critical factor. We can see on that slide the cost to build. It's very high. For many homeowners, access to financial support could be the deciding factor in whether they proceed with building an ADU. Additionally, it will be essential for us to educate our community about the benefits and feasibility of ADUs, as well as the importance of adding these restricted units to our pool of workforce housing. To maximize the potential of our ADU Accelerator program, we will need additional support, specifically more funding opportunities to supplement homeowners' financial capacities and clarity through the permitting process. We have appreciated support from Placer County staff on addressing this need, and we look forward to continue that partnership. We're excited about the Launchpad proposal that we're going to be hearing today, and we think that program paired with the ADU Accelerator will result in a significant increase of ADUs to house our local employees. We are looking forward to learning more and providing input on how this initiative could facilitate the creations of ADUs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to comment? Please come forward. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, supervisors. Welcome to Tahoe, and while you're in town, I hope you take time to talk to local business owners.
Excuse me, before you get on, could you tell us your name?
I'll get there.
Okay, all right, we'll have patience then.
Ask them where their employees live and what they see as their biggest threat to their businesses. My name is Sean Whalen, and I constructed the first workforce housing project in 2014 in Truckee, another in Tahoe City in 2021, and I will complete entitlement this fall on a 62-unit project in Truckee. It is all just a drop in the bucket, but I know from firsthand experience of the issues and the remedies that are needed. I have had meetings with Tim Cusson and am encouraged by his work and the thought he is putting into the problems that we have housing our own. You have an opportunity. Tim's effort will be for naught if you do not take meaningful action. Tahoe is your cash cow, and it's imploding. Protect your investment and fund these programs in a meaningful way. Throwing a few TOT dollars at this just doesn't cut it. Even all 11 million TOT dollars will not protect your investment. I will be serving on the TOT Advisory Committee and will do everything that I can, but it is the wrong bucket of dollars for this issue. The property appreciation and associated Placer County property tax windfall from Tahoe has led to the displacement of the community that keeps this economy running. Those are the dollars that must be returned in a meaningful way to tackle our problem. I challenge you to be aggressive in your funding, as anything else is just window dressing, and we have all witnessed how well that works. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Good afternoon.
Oh, I'm short. Thank you, Chair and Board of Supervisors, for hosting this meeting up in Tahoe. My name is Heidi Drum, and I am the Executive Director of the Tahoe Prosperity Center. And apologies, I have another afternoon meeting. Otherwise, I would stay for the whole session today. So I really appreciate you letting me share a few words now. So First, applaud putting housing with economic development, not only because Gloria is awesome running that, she's really great and a huge asset to Placer County and our board, but also because we realized a few years ago that that housing is economic development 101. So the Tahoe Prosperity Center is the regional economic development organization in the basin. So we work in Nevada and California. We work on the North Shore and the South Shore. So we're a private, small nonprofit working on economic development. And we realized this many, many years ago. So you guys recognizing that is huge. Second, we also applaud Placer County for the innovative housing work that you've already done. So many great programs and opportunities. And you've been very proactive, which is, we think, really, really important. And it shows some of the other districts as well. So for example, Lease to Locals program has been phenomenal. It is the best return on investment. You're housing people immediately at a very small price point compared to building an ADU, for example. And so continuing that program and supporting that is huge. We are actually helping to launch it across the border on the North Shore and Nevada side in Washoe County currently. So kudos, great success. Love to see that continuing. The Workforce Housing Preservation Program, an awesome program. I qualified for it and still couldn't find a home to live. So I needed a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a garage. You can't find that in this community, in the parameters of that program. It was very, very challenging. So that was strike number 1 for us. We were renting. We wanted to live here in the North Lake Tahoe area full time and buy a home. Couldn't do it even with that awesome program. Second strike was Hopkins Village. So my husband is a firefighter. I run a nonprofit. We made 182% of AMI. Hopkins is at 180% AMI. Trust me, I tried to get the change, like, just let us in, we're so close, but didn't happen. So anyway, that's my personal story, but I know that there are so many others like me just above the AMI. So I really applaud Supervisor Gustafson's recommendation to have it be locally employment-based. I think you will keep more workers here. Our businesses will thrive with their workers here as opposed to having their workers drive from Reno and other areas, Sierra, north of Truckee, et cetera. And then last, I think, again, the innovative nature of the Launchpad program is phenomenal. And you've heard from the developers and others, so keep those going, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Samir Tuma. I guess it's Housing Hub Day at the Board of Supervisors. I'm on the board of the Housing Hub, also as a developer of workforce housing. And Heidi just said it, Cindy said it, but I just feel we need to say it again. We really need to be careful about AMI restricting these projects. It just, the banks, part of the resistance, lenders don't like deed restrictions, so that takes a certain funding mechanism away. Hopkins Village, product's been out there. We have 7 units that we can't sell with the shortage that we have, and that's only at 180% of AMI. The 350% of AMI, you know, that's, to me, just to be honest with you, I think that's a fool's errand. I think what we're talking about here is workforce housing. Regardless of what people make, if we want people who can work and afford to live here, that's what we need to be focused on. And I know that there's some fear or concern that multimillionaires are somehow going to move into these units and live in these units. It's a red herring. That's just not the case. If we were housing all the people who were making 300% of AMI, it'd be a different conversation. But we're not. And those are the people that work in the community. If Heidi can't get a place in this community, then those restrictions are problematic. So wonderful, great programs. Really applaud the team and what they're doing here. But this AMI restriction is and it's going to come up again in the next item. Be really careful about that, because as we've gone out to the people, the ADU accelerator that Carolina was talking about, deed restrictions are something that scare people, scare lenders, scare homeowners in creating those, and it's an unnecessary scare. So please really pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Here we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, County Supervisors. My name is Heidi Alstead with the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. Additionally, I serve as a member of your STR advisory group as well. Our mission is to facilitate workforce housing solutions in the Truckee Tahoe work region. As you know, Placer County is one of our 7 member agencies that make up our agency. Since 2020, we've served over 600 people in our community with general housing support, home purchase education and assistance, and access to rental homes. This past year, our team assisted Placer County employees through our housing concierge services, as well as matching new employees with rentals through our home rental program. Our staff continues to promote and educate workforce housing Our staff continues to promote and educate the workforce about Placer County's housing programs, such as WIP and Lease to Locals. Additionally, we're working with our county staff around moving these programs, the administration of these programs, to our agency as well. So we're super excited about that. Some of our goals over the next fiscal year will be finalizing a master lease pilot program, which we can duplicate throughout our community, as well as establishing fund management agreements to unlock private dollars and public dollars. We're also facilitating 2 development opportunities with our public agencies, one with the TTUSD Alder Creek site, as well as the U.S. Forest Service Hobart Mill site in Nevada County. We're also working with Sierra Business Council and our other housing partners around a public affairs housing advocacy program, which is really critical in our region, that will hopefully advance public policy at the state and federal levels for our community as well. So we're really excited to continue the work that we're doing with all of our housing partners here in the back of the room, as well as the Placer County team. So thank you. We've got some tall waterfalls, right, to go over here in our housing space. So we really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
Anyone else care to comment? There we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Supervisors. My name's Tony Karwowski. Just this real quick. President and CEO of the North Tahoe Community Alliance. And first off, just want to say thank you again for maintaining the schedule of having your quarterly meetings here in North Lake Tahoe and hearing from your constituency in their home territory, hearing the issues that are here. Sometimes it's a little more complex here in Eastern Placer County, and we realize that and appreciate your efforts in taking the time and scheduling your time to be here, acknowledging the people here and our feedback. I wanted to say, in listening to the conversation around housing, Supervisor Gore, when we were going over the need by unit type slide, and you mentioned it's really about the quality of life here. I want to build on that a little bit and say it's also about the quality of community. Really, when we take a look at having 25% of our housing available and the need of 8,000 additional units to house our community is so imbalanced. And what that leads to is when you go out in our community and you go to Music on the Beach, you go to, kids' baseball games, there's a different makeup, and that makeup is shrinking, and it's noticeable. And really what we're fighting here for is tomorrow. This is about what our community looks like tomorrow. How are we going to place ourselves in a way with our partners that you see here in the room? They're very vociferous. Some of them are working and acknowledging that they are working and they can't even afford to live here themselves. And this is the leadership of our community. This is an imperative point we're at right now. I encourage you to work with staff and bring forward innovative projects and programs that take considerations in new ways, and taking a look at AMI. Is AMI a definition we need to work with going forward? We really need to bring housing here now to preserve our community for tomorrow. The other thing I want to touch on real quick is economic benefit of community. When we're exporting 8,000 units a day of workforce into other communities, guess where that spend goes? We have a tourism-based economy here in North Lake Tahoe that spikes, right? Summer and winter. What happens in the shoulder seasons? Go ask any of the businesses. Walk down Kings Beach tomorrow afternoon, midday. See how busy things are. The gap can be filled substantially if we build the right community of tomorrow by that community itself. They'll go out. They'll go out to eat in the shoulder seasons. They'll spend in all of our businesses. So just wanted to complete the circle on some of that conversation. Thanks again for joining us at your quarterly meeting, and I look forward to hearing Launchpad presentation coming up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to comment or have questions? Anyone online?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Chris, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments.
Yes, good afternoon, Supervisors. Chris Egger of Tahoe City. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a few comments after seeing this presentation and watching some of the comments others in the public have made. I think it's really problematic the ways in which some conclusions are drawn based on assumptions, and I'm going to point out two of those in particular. One, as it concerns for sale or ownership of housing, there's an assumption the numbers that were put forth were based on median housing prices, which I think is really inaccurate and problematic. It seems to me that if someone is struggling to afford a house, that basing something, a calculation, and then an estimate of how many people can afford houses off of the median house price is really a disservice. I think that if someone is struggling to afford a house or a condo to buy, that they should be looking towards the bottom end of the distribution, not necessarily in terms of quality, but just in terms of price. It's about personal responsibility to buy and look for what you can afford. Don't ask for handouts for something that's well beyond your means. The second assumption concerns this 30% number in terms of how much of someone's income they can use on housing. That's an ideal. Half of American renters nationwide spend more than 30% of their income on housing expenses. It's going to be a lot more productive if we recognize that people can spend more than that and still be okay. Just case in point, if you spend 30% of your income and you live in Reno and you commute 2 hours a day and spend $25 a day in gas, I know a lot of people who would be willing to spend much more of their income to live here or and have that free time for themselves. Or recently I looked, a residential unit of use in Placer County to build a unit, whether that's an apartment or a house here in the Tahoe Basin, costs about $40,000 right now. That comes out to about $200 a month if it were to be an apartment or so. That would have to be additional rent charge compared to building the same exact apartment in Olympic Valley or in Truckee. I know a lot of people who would gladly spend $200 a month for increased quality of life living down the street from the lake than living in Truckee. And then I also want to note, and this is a sensitive subject, but there's a sense of entitlement among some people. If someone says that they can't find a house that meets their needs, but their needs include a garage, I think they need to reevaluate what the word need means. A garage is something that plenty of people live with, myself included, but it's not a need. Live without, myself included. I don't have a garage. Do I want one? Yeah. Do I want to live lakefront? Of course. But I don't need those. So I'm not going to ask someone else to subsidize those. I think the community needs a reality check on just what sort of housing we should be providing for people. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Niobe, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments.
Hello, Board of Supervisors and Placer County staff. I unfortunately didn't get to see the whole program, but I will go back and see the recording. Thank you for all your work. I only had two questions. One was, are we capturing any of the, in either an exit poll or an exit questionnaire, the people that are unable to take jobs here, applicants that may have applied for jobs but have not because of housing or because of some other reason? Are we capturing that information as to how many applicants and whether they have families or not families? And kind of that missing information that we may have not be accounting for in the 8,200 housing needs. So that's the one question. Are we able to capture that information in the exit polls? And the second question was on the dollar pre-crossing. I know there's a lot of concerns in the public, and I don't know a huge amount myself, but are we working towards making that project 50% affordable, 50% achievable? Mostly, are there goals as to what the county wants in that project? And I know that there's feasibility studies and so forth to do that, to make those compromises with the developer, but are there goals in that area between achievable and affordable? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Andrew, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. Andrew Ryan here, Kings Beach resident. Just had an opportunity to kind of run some numbers while I listened to that presentation, and based on the 8,200 units needed and the low per unit cost of 500,000 and the high per unit cost, that works out to a total number of 4.1 billion on the low side needed and 6.56 billion on the high side. So that's pretty staggering numbers. You know, if we invested all of the county's 1.2 billion budget, it'd take 3.4 years on the low side to build that number of units, or 5.4 years on the high side. So I think I'm very encouraged to hear this conversation moving forward, and I hope when you realize the scale of this as the board, you all really push for as many tools in the toolkit that we can apply to this problem and to this challenge, because we really have to come at it from all angles. We're talking about the money side now and how to solve that, but there's also a lot of on the policy side as well. And with the ADU program, you know, I think when we are truly serious, both TRPA and Placer County, about getting ADUs built, we'll have a 1-hour turnaround time. If someone shows up with a complete permit submittal, they'll be issued a permit in an hour. And until we achieve that on a policy side, it won't matter even if we have this money on the money side. So remember, we need both things, and thanks again. Both things meaning money and policy changes, and thanks again for having this discussion today. I was encouraged to hear all the work happening.
Thank you for your comments. No further comments? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to the board then. And Supervisor Landon.
Thanks. I have one question. It might be a dumb question, sorry. On the Hopkins Village project, is that affordable housing and not achievable housing? Is that why the local employee thing doesn't apply to that?
That development was created through a developer obligation negotiated prior to our affordable housing and employee accommodation ordinance.
Okay.
And the AMI was set based on the agreement that the county has for that project.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Gore.
Thank you. I had a quick question for Heidi, if you don't mind, if I just ask the question about the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency. What's your concierge services? I read that in the board packet and I didn't get it, and you mentioned it, and I'm just curious as to what that means.
Yes, sorry, I have a cough drop in, I apologize. Yes, our concierge services really is about people contacting us, and then we help them basically go out and find housing, right, in any way possible. So we really are there with them the whole way and to advocate for them.
Right,
as well.
so you're identifying all the programs, all the
Yes.
potential funding mechanisms.
Yes.
What can you pull on and
Navigating
what
the
can you do?
landscape of all things housing.
That is really, I'm sure, very helpful.
Yeah, it
Great,
is.
thank
Yeah.
you. Because you're helping get out the word on these programs as well as other
Absolutely.
programs that other jurisdictions have.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks.
Supervisor Gustafson.
Thank you. Couple follow-ups on questions that came up online. One was about the median home price and why use that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that is pretty much the standard of how every jurisdiction looks at it. We can't get down to that granular level of the ranges.
Tim and I
mean,
were just,
Yeah.
we were just talking about this when we were hearing that comment.
Yeah.
Board of Realtors does provide kind of stratification, which we can bring forward at some time.
Right.
We just were using that as a simple point of reference, but
And it is,
understood.
it could be refined more, and I would agree if you can do that. But it is a rule of thumb that all jurisdictions look at, typically AMI and then the median household price and rents. So I think it's pretty standard across the state, across the nation, but if we can refine it more to be more objective. The second was the issue about the Niobe raised about exit interviews. And I think that's really challenging because some of these people either don't apply at all or tell their employer it's a housing issue, but they don't have to follow up with us. But maybe we could reach out to employers to try to get some more data points on that. Again, it wouldn't be necessarily objective, statistically valid numbers, but I know that many of us, whether it's our own public safety division, our code enforcement, even our county employees, why have people not accepted the jobs even with the supplemental income? And then just following up on my own, I want to thank Erin Casey for sharing such a personal story about the challenges you faced. And you know that I share that with you, that when I was a single mom, it was quite a struggle to stay in my home. And I did rent out a room and try to stay in my home in a crisis. Far pales to what you went through many years later, because you're that much younger than I am. But when you look at the number of people that are trying to make it work here in our community and the profound impacts it has when you don't have local people working in your community. And as an employer for many years in the region, I can tell you I watched that turnover from applicants within our district applying for our district jobs to what we now have, which is people coming and doing their work and leaving. And they're not now the baseball coaches or the soccer moms that I was or the snack bar mom that I was. All those things that you do in your community to help serve and make it a more empathetic and caring community, when you just do your job and leave, it has economic impacts, but it has that profound community impact too. And I share that, and I want to thank everybody for their stories about those impacts are so broad-reaching and why we've done so much on this housing front and working to raise additional money and come up with new programs. And I'm excited to hear about the next one. So thank you.
Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's very profound, in-depth. I'm impressed by how many organizations and people are actually working on this in the Tahoe area. It is a tremendous challenge, but we have to keep moving forward and trying to make things work. So more work to come, but anyhow, I appreciate all the hard work for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, before we go further, would the staff like to address any of the questions that the public posed or comments?
I know one of the questions came up that somebody asked about workers in other counties and where they're located. Economic development tracks data quite closely, and we could get information and put things like that on our website. However, we also have people that come from other counties to work for us. And so it kind of works out that it sort of averages out, so we don't really spend a lot of our time looking at that, but we can include that as some of the data that we do post on our economic development website.
Gloria, I'm sorry, can I interrupt? I think, I could be wrong, but I think what they're specifically thinking about is the major employers just across the state line. Because for decades, we've known that is quite a draw for much of our Kings Beach community is working across the state line and then living in the Kings Beach community. So I think it's really specific, not just other states in general, but in that pocket of that community. So that might be something to talk to the Washoe County people about.
And we can get that, again, so that's like census data that we do have access to, and we can see commute times and where people are going, so that's something that we can do. The AMI limits, as we keep hearing, I think we should have a discussion about that. I think we, as our housing team, will definitely be, I can tell you it's going to be talked about in the car on the way back down the hill. And what should we do? And we'll come back with ideas and thoughts for you all. It's kind of nice and freeing to us when you have a creative team and you're told, think outside the box about something. So for us, I think it's probably a little bit of relief. A quick comment about surveying people who do not take the jobs here. That's one of the things that maybe we could use our Economic Development Board to help with and see if there are contacts that they could reach out to. Again, it would be not scientific data because the samples wouldn't be of significant size, but what we could get is anecdotes of what are these people who represent on this board finding and the people that they know as well. So I think we could get some of the stories to help continue to refine this discussion. And I think, we'll be coming back again next year with an update similar to this, but you're also going to be hearing about all these individual programs coming back as well. So you're going to have many times to keep kicking our tires, and we'll have many more times to keep having this conversation. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation and for entertaining everyone's questions and concerns. Anything you'd like to say to wrap it up, or no?
No, thank you, and thank you for all the,
Thank you for your team.
Sure.
Yes, thank you to all your team for all their hard work and a great presentation. And so we will move on. I guess you guys are going to be doing the next one too. So our second item is the proposed Launchpad Housing Incentive Program.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors.
Good afternoon.
Tim Cusson, Tahoe Housing Specialist, here to discuss a proposed Launchpad Housing Incentive Program. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of background. I know we just went through a lot of housing numbers, but just a little bit more. We'll go through an overview of the program, as well as the eligibility and components of the program. We'll look at a sample project, and then open it up for discussion and questions. So staff looks at deed restrictions as being a valuable tool to helping with our workforce housing problem. Over the last 20 years, only 4 deed-restricted multifamily developments have been built in Eastern Placer, so we're hoping to improve that number a little. The 8,200 households within our school district that are inadequately housed, around 50% of those households are at or below 80% median income. Another 36% fall in between 80 and 120%. So as we were building the program, we wanted to make sure that we were capturing some deed restrictions for those income levels as well. I would like to make a correction of our staff report for the record. Our report does mention the number 35,045 housing units being the number of single-family homes within the school district. However, that is the total number of housing units. Of that, 82%, over 82% are single-family homes, and the remaining 17.2 broken between units in projects from 2 to 4 units, 5 to 19 units, over 20 units, and a small 1.6% are mobile homes. So with the median home price at $1.3 million, we wanted to make a program to help create some of those additional multifamily projects, ADUs, things that are smaller in cost and easier to pay for our workforce. So an overview of the program, this is a financial incentive program to help facilitate the creation of new housing units in Eastern Placer. The units would be deed restricted for 80%, 120% AMI, or local workforce, depending on the project size. As part of development, staff conducted 15 interviews with local employers, community members, developers, and applicants of the 2023 NTCA annual grant cycle. Interviewees were provided feedback to staff on incentive types that would increase feasibility for creating housing for the local workforce. Participants would have the option of choosing a low-interest loan and/or a deed restriction disbursement as part of the program. Eligible participants of the program would be developers, nonprofits, and other individuals or entities. Participants and/or their staff and contractors must have sufficient experience, capacity, and training in housing development. The eligible product types or property types allowed would be condos, townhomes, multifamily properties, ADUs, single-family room or single-room occupancy, non-residential conversion to building code compliant residential space, and other projects that may be deemed appropriate. Once the units were completed, they would be allowed to be made available for sale or for rent. Participants of the program may choose to deed restrict all of the housing units of the project or a designated portion. However, the incentives would be calculated only on the deed restricted portion. Prospective participants may complete a pre-application to gauge program eligibility. However, no funds will be awarded or set aside until a full application package had been received and all program criteria was met. Staff envisions a certain level of readiness for the commitment of funds, and you're either at or most of the way through your entitlement and permitting process. What we don't want to see is funds committed and then sitting on the sidelines while participants navigate that sometimes lengthy process. That's also something we would hope to increase the time frame, turn time on. Projects may not use the program to fulfill obligations of the Placer County Affordable Housing and Employee Accommodation Ordinance. We're on to the components. The first one being a low interest loan that could be used for property acquisition and or construction and renovation costs. It would have a low 3% fixed rate, which generally is 5 to 6 below current construction financing rates. It would have a 5-year term, allowing those funds to be revolving and support subsequent projects and reduce future program funding needs. The loan amounts would be capped at 50% of the fair market value of the deed restricted component, with a maximum loan amount up to $1.5 million. Participants would also have interest-only payments for the life of the loan. The next component would be the use deed restriction. This is similar in structure to our WIP deed restriction with additional provisions for larger projects. For every 4 units subject to the deed restriction, 1 would be subject to an income restriction. The income restriction assignment would alternate between 80% AMI and 120% AMI and below. And the table on the screen dictates just a sample of how income restrictions would be assigned based on various project sizes. So for example, a project that was deed restricting 4 to 7 units would have 1 80% AMI restricted unit. The remaining would be restricted for local workers only. And a project of 8 to 11 deed restricted units would have 1 80% AMI restricted and 1 120% AMI restricted unit. The remaining units would be local workforce. The income restricted units would not have the local workforce component, so that would open it up for fixed income and or retired folks to be able to qualify for those units. The rent on the income restricted units would be capped at 30% of the annual or monthly income of the corresponding income bracket, either 80 or 120. Distribution of the income restricted units within a property would be at the discretion of the participant. However, it would have to be as evenly distributed between units of various sizes and bedroom counts as the project would allow. The non-income restricted units would have the same qualified resident requirement as our WIP program. So that would be a full-time or equivalent employee at a location within TTUSD boundaries, or 4 as a business whose principal and exclusive coverage area is the Lake Tahoe Basin. The same provision with local workers as well. If you are a local worker working within the school district boundaries, you would also have to work for an employer who was located within the TTUSD or who operated as the principal and exclusive coverage area of the basin. The non-income restricted units would not be subject to rent restrictions. The deed restriction would run similarly to the WIP program of 55 years and restart upon each transfer of the property. We understand that there's also will be projects submitting that are utilizing TRPA's bonus unit incentive program, which has its own deed restriction requirements. So as of this point, the two, if you are utilizing both, you would have to manage both deed restrictions concurrently. This is one point of the program that we are looking for specific guidance on how best to incorporate when someone is using both of those programs. We recognize it could be cumbersome for a property owner to have both deed restrictions to manage. The final component is the deed restriction disbursement. This is made after the certificate of occupancy is reached. Staff estimates the value of the deed restriction to be similarly to our WIP program at 16% of the fair market value. We are waiting on a study to confirm that this still applies with the various product types that we are now allowing in this program that WIP does not. There would be no cap to the disbursement. However, disbursement amounts above 1.5 million would require specific approval by your Board of Supervisors. As a frame of reference, if we were using the 16%, a deed restriction disbursement of 1.5 million would correlate to a property value of 9.375 million, which we would anticipate a pretty large project, 15 to 20-ish units. Only the fair market value would be used as the measurement for calculating the deed restriction disbursement, but to ensure adequate value was received by the county, we would do a per unit disbursement calculation by taking that disbursement, dividing it by the number of deed restricted units, and that figure could not exceed 150,000 per unit, which is to be consistent with our WIP program. So the program is set up currently to be able to capture projects of all sizes. However, our lot sizes and our geographic constraints, we envision more infill and smaller type projects to be what we see submitted most often. So this is an example of one such project. This would be a duplex with an ADU and a junior ADU. It would have an estimated fair market value of 1.3 million. This project would produce 4 deed restricted units, one at 80% AMI, the other 3 restricted for local workers. This type of project would be eligible for a $650,000 low interest loan and a deed restriction disbursement of $208,000 upon completion. In addition to overall program feedback and input, we'd like to highlight a couple of areas we'd like specific input on. That would be the requirement for the income restrictions for low and moderate income levels, the loan amount to be capped at 1.5 million, the deed restriction disbursement to have an unlimited cap, as well as the requirement to come to the Board of Supervisors for approval on disbursements above 1.5 million. The eligibility of using the loan funds toward acquiring a property, and the coordination with TRPA deed restrictions required through the bonus unit incentive program. And with that, we'd like to open it up for any questions and feedback you may have.
Thank you for that. I'd like to bring it to the board for Questions or comments? None at this time. I think we'll open it up to the public. Would anyone like to come forward and ask questions or make comments? Seeing none, is there anyone online? Oh, hold on just a second. Here she comes.
Waiting. Hi. Good afternoon. Erin Casey here with the Tahoe Housing Hub. Just a few comments. First, I would say thank you so much to your board and to county staff for putting this program concept together. I really do believe it's going to make a significant difference in a variety of ways. I think that, as you heard from Carolina, we are in the early stages of rolling out our ADU Accelerator program, and she has had several conversations with members of our community who live in Kings Beach, Tahoe City, all across the region who are interested in doing this. But the high cost of construction, as well as the permitting costs, among other things, are overwhelming at times. And so the ability to offset those costs through a program like this, paired with a program like ours, where we are helping individuals who, by the way, in most cases, don't have any real experience in developing a project. So applying for a permit, working through the complexities of getting permits in the Tahoe Basin in addition to that, are often a deterrent as well. And so we think the combination of these two things could be very powerful. A few things in terms of feedback. I'd say a question I have really is, would there be potential for a tiered approach given the types of deed restrictions that might be associated with this? One of the things I'm observing is that to get someone to deed restrict a unit to affordable or moderate levels is more challenging, because you can charge less or the income restrictions are more significant. And so I think incentives need to be scaled appropriately. I understand that you're looking at the fair market value as the input into this calculation. And I don't know whether or not that analysis will take into account somebody's constraints if they can only rent the unit to somebody who's making 80% AMI or less, and on, right? So those are some things I think to keep in mind if they're not already being accounted for. I also think that deed restrictions are still something that are a deterrent at times for people. When I look at other communities in the West that have sort of gotten past that obstacle, where they have a much larger percentage of units that are deed restricted, there's a lot of community and public outreach that's happened to help people get there. And I think that we should, there's an opportunity to partner with organizations like ours to do workshops on what these are, not just for lenders, but for members of the community, so that they really understand what a deed restriction is, what the impacts are. They can have their questions answered. And also there are a variety of types of deed restrictions, right? They're not all created equal. And so part of what could be, what you can learn from that is what are the types of sidebars or provisions that people might be willing to consider in order to deed restrict. There are other communities that have done that. And I just want to say the Hub is willing to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else in the audience? Okay.
Good afternoon, Samir Tuma. Just a couple comments about specific elements. The $1.5 million loan amount, one thing that wasn't clear was whether you'd be willing to have that as a second deed of trust as opposed to the primary loan on the property, because at $1.5 million, if that's on a $9 million project, I'm not sure where that's going to fit on the capital stack, and I think probably not at the top, but that creates a question that would need to be addressed. The other thing is, while I recognize that there is a deficiency in the below 80% AMI, there's significant reason for that, and I'm just not persuaded that we're going to get there if we're trying to build to that level where once you hit 4 units in a project, you've got to have one of them deed restricted at 80%. I just don't know that works in this part of the county. The example that was put up there about the 2 ADUs with 2 JADUs, be interested in learning a little bit more about that. if those would be all that would be on the parcel. How does that work? Can you have an ADU where there's not a primary resident? And would also be interested to hear if someone just wanted to do an ADU, how would this program work? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the public?
Hello, Tony Karwowski, CEO of North Tahoe Community Alliance. Just want to give a shout out to staff here at the county. Thank you so much for being responsive to some of the feedback that we've heard through the TOT TBID Dollars at Work program to bring Launchpad forward. A couple thoughts in Launchpad in terms of how it's work. We've talked with staff and we encourage staff to continue to investigate different components of how the program is structured from a financing perspective and recommendation of the funding perspective. As we look at the TOT TBID Dollars at Work program, our committees make recommendation both of TOT and TBID dollars to specific projects in the community that they are aligned around and champion, and make recommendation both to our board for expenditure and TBID funds and to your board for expenditure of TOT funds. So I would look to staff to continue to investigate whether we would like this program to have specific applicants come to the TOT TBID Dollars at Work annual grant cycle or other grant cycles for consideration of being moved on to Launchpad for the specific programming and pairing that funding source with the programming versus the potential for the county to come to the TOT TBID Dollars at Work program, ask for a bulk of funding for the program specific. Two different kind of ways of reviewing the individual projects and two different ways of kind of ascertaining community support for individual projects. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Hi, for the record, Carolina Scarsha with the Tahoe Housing Hub. Couple comments. One of the first ones would be to ask for staff to consider adding its own category for for ADUs that are being construction associated with single-family properties and not part as multifamily development. And this is a question, if staff could clarify, when in the process would the homeowner be notified that they would be getting the funds? Because you mentioned a pre-application phase, but would that submittal of a pre-application just say you may get it, or is going to be a final determination on it? And also, we would like to suggest that as part of the Launchpad program, if staff would consider making a requirement for small-scale developers as part of a single-family property that it's trying to build an ADU, to consider working with the ADU accelerator, which would facilitate the submittal of the applications to make them clear, and it's going to be streamlined that way if they are working through the hub with our assistance of getting them through the regulation process. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, let's go to our online callers.
Chris, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments.
Yes, good afternoon, supervisors. Chris Egger of Tahoe City again. I'd like to provide some input on the proposed Launchpad program. To contextualize my comments, I'm a social scientist with a degree in economics who studied under a Nobel laureate. I'm a community member who has been paying close attention to housing issues for years, and I've witnessed the consequences of our housing shortage locally. And I've also seriously considered several smaller housing projects myself, including being in contract on a property as recently as last month. I didn't complete that purchase because it didn't pencil out. As an economist, providing subsidies such as what the Launchpad program proposes to developers to promote the construction of new housing is exactly what the county should be doing to help address the housing shortage. While there have been and continue to be numerous other efforts, such as what you heard earlier today about WIP, lease to locals, etc., these other programs don't actually lead to the creation of new housing. Getting back to fundamentals, the way to address a shortage is to increase the number of units that exist. In doing so, we'll also make existing inventory more affordable by shifting the market equilibrium as determined by supply and demand. And as Friedrich Hayek made clear in his seminal article on the use of knowledge in society and the failures of central planning, by making this program available to anyone and everyone, it leverages local on-the-ground knowledge and the ingenuity and risk-taking of far more individuals and developers than does something like the disastrous centrally planned Dollar Creek Crossing project. Having thoroughly looked at what it takes to construct new housing myself, I do want to note that the 16% figure mentioned mentioned concerning the deed restriction may not be enough to close the gap between what new construction costs and what it is worth once constructed. I would hope that the program incorporates some sort of element that allows this amount to increase if it doesn't adequately spur new construction. Furthermore, if the WIP program provides a 16% subsidy for existing housing, given that the construction of new units is far more valuable in terms of increasing the housing stock, then the subsidy amount ought to reflect this additional value to the community. Another observation concerns what sort of housing would be eligible for the program and ensuring that the subsidy isn't overly generous for what is being produced. Specifically, there are different costs associated with new construction as compared to non-residential conversions as compared to making existing residential units code compliant. Having some sort of different level of subsidy given the cost and value add of an eligible property might be warranted. Aaron had a great comment about providing higher subsidies for a more income restricted unit. That's great. As to Tony's comment on going through the Resort Association, we know that they have their own motives, that they like to brand everything to garner support for their illegal sales tax known as the TBIT assessment. I'm not interested in doing that. I want a program run by the county where I don't have to run through the Resort Association before going to the county. Finally, in my opinion, the fact that this program addresses the fundamental issue with the housing shortage in our area, I would advocate for all housing funds to be allocated away from other programs into this program. This includes WIP funds, lease to local funds, in lieu fees, TOT funds such as those allocated for Chalet Blanc and Dollar Creek Crossing, and I would further advocate that the county sell the Nahas property and put those funds toward this program. In sum, I'm thrilled to see the county considering the Launchpad program and believe it holds tremendous promise as it concerns making substantive, meaningful progress in addressing the housing shortage plaguing our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Andrew, go ahead and unmute your mic and give your comments.
Hello, Board of Supervisors. Andrew Ryan again, here from Kings Beach. I had a number of conversations with Tim as he worked on this program, and I was appreciative to be included and have the opportunity to chat with him. Similar, I think, kind of the short, version of our comments is I kept coming back to him and letting him know that I thought the subsidy amount wasn't enough. Just on some simple numbers I had run for a recent pro forma on trying to do a tiny home project, which didn't even have foundations for the structures in order to pencil on a property that I've owned for a number of years. So I already have a lower cost basis with that property. I needed a subsidy that was closer to $200,000 per unit to do all the code upgrades and develop the site, bring in infrastructure and whatnot. And that wasn't making me money. My pro forma barely allowed me to have enough in reserves to maintain it, given the expected rents once deed restricted. So I would encourage you to try to be more aggressive on the smallest projects. I think that's a great place to start, is that 1 to 4 units, to be most aggressive there. It can always be dialed back if we think something not beneficial is happening or there's too much subsidy. Specifically to that, I do like the low interest loan program that's here to help with the construction costs. I would ask that loan, that the requirements of the low interest loans reflect the FHA 203B loan, which is a residential loan of 1 to 4 units. So when I say residential loan versus a commercial loan, what I'm really telling you is that it's easier to apply and to be verified for a residential loan. Once you start getting into a commercial loan above 4 units, it's much harder. So really targeting that 1 to 4 in the most aggressive manner would be beneficial. with the income restrictions starting on Unit 4, this is something I asked Tim if that could be pushed to Unit 5. With the FHA 203B loan for 1 to 4 units, the developer is also required to live in one of the units. So that also has someone local developing their property, managing where they live, and bringing along a nice community element. The other key piece of the 203B loan is that 49% of it can be commercial. Our lowest priced land right now happens to be usually adjacent to or touching our town centers because they are depressed, at least in Kings Beach. So the opportunity to do mixed use is huge. It's probably the lowest hanging fruit. So if this program can help fund construction and match a refinance of an FHA loan, I think that would be a win. And I encourage you guys moving forward and would ask that you give direction to be most aggressive in the 1 to 4 unit category. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. No further. Supervisor Gore.
Thank you, appreciate all those questions. And so I did have, my first question is, have we looked at models where this has been done elsewhere? And if so, where is that? Or, I'm just curious.
The town of Truckee has just rolled out a program offering similar, not exactly the same, but very similar.
But it's new, so they haven't yet?
But it's new, correct.
Okay.
And I have not come across any other development type programs like this.
Because I remember 5 years ago, we were talking about what they were doing in Vail, excuse me. And I don't recall what those programs were, but there are a lot of other mountain communities that have programs, and I didn't know if this was modeled after one of those. And it might be helpful to see. I did have that question about the second mortgage that Samir had. I realized, gosh, what happens if they default, right? And they have a loan, commercial loan, and then default. So what might we do about that? You may not have the answer to that, but it is something we have to work through. I heard the gentleman's comment about taking all of our dollars and putting it into this program. And although I appreciate that, I also understand that building really takes time. And there's a lot more challenges with building a project than there is with actually getting locations leased and actually getting people housed right away. So we have to see if this works before we do that. And did I see that we're looking at having funding come from perhaps the general fund versus other programs, or have we determined where the funding would come from at this point?
Our initial thought is that it would be funded through TOT funds.
Okay. I think that's the answer to, or those are the questions I have now. Thank you.
Supervisor Gustafson.
Thank you. I think the uniqueness we have, and that I haven't found a comparable, is the significant growth restrictions within the Tahoe Basin. So we can't build our way out of the housing need we need. And that's why so many of our programs focused on trying to unlock those existing units. But I do agree that's what's driven our prices up. And they've been, we saw the chart earlier today on the extraordinary rise in property values because there's limited supply and a lot of demand to have homes in Tahoe. We've always been predominantly vacation homes, 80%. Even when I started at the Tahoe City PUD, 80% of our sewer bills went outside the region to second homeowners and vacation homeowners. And trying to unlock those and get them back into the program, into housing for locals, has got to be part of this. But I appreciate on Launchpad, Tim, the work you've done, working with developers, but I encourage us to keep thinking about it, because I've even questioned, the 150,000 and the 16%, how that's dwindled since we first established those rates for the Workforce Housing Preservation Program. If there's a gap still in return on investment for these developers, then we're not going to see the projects move forward. So we've got to make sure that gap is reduced to a point where there is an incentive for people to look at the reason they would take that risk with their hard-earned dollars to invest in this area to build these units. And I liked some of the suggestions I heard, and I hope you can continue to work with those individuals to refine the program. I really am excited about trying to get some new units built, and there are some opportunity sites, but I don't think as nearly as many as the need and demand is. So good job. I mean, great job in working on this. And you know what, one thing we found with whether it was short-term rental ordinances or workforce housing preservation program, all the things that we don't imagine somebody might do or could do that we have to refine later. So we won't get it right the first time, but we've got to start giving hope to people that they can get money to do an ADU or a small development or a larger development. So don't be afraid to take that risk, and I think I would urge my fellow board members, we may not have all the answers until we get underway and see where those glitches are in the program. And I am mindful of that AMI restriction could be really challenging for some of those, but maybe balancing it out with a higher incentive would help encourage people to build some of those units as well. Thank you.
Supervisor Holmes, did you want to?
No, my questions were answered.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good. Would staff care to answer some of the questions that the community posed, concerns?
I am happy to answer some of the questions. I will not have all the answers for all of them. We are also still working on this and trying to make it as usable as possible. Wanted to, in answer to Supervisor Gustafson's question regarding the 16%, the initial valuation of 16% was a study done for the WIP program, which was under construction at or before the COVID timeframe. So one of the things we're working on is an updated study, not only to make it more current, done in this environment, post-COVID pricing, but also include the different property types that are allowed. As part of that process, the contractor is planning to reach out to local developers for their input on their pro formas and exactly what it would mean to them. So I believe that as part of that updated study, we will get an updated valuation and see if it is 16% or not, or more. And for Carolina's question regarding the pre-application process, applicants would be able to get kind of an initial approval of, once you're ready, this project appears to meet all of the program guidelines. No funds are committed until you have a full application. We're still working on exactly what that means, but that would be that level of readiness with, at or almost there for permitting and entitlement process. For Samir's question regarding ADUs would be able to be a single participant. In almost every other situation, more than one unit would need to be generated. But in an ADU, that would be a situation where one housing unit could be created through the program.
Ask a clarification with the ADU. So would
Sure.
that need to be income restricted or just available for somebody in the workplace in the area?
Great question. So projects creating 1 to 3 deed restricted units would not have any income restrictions. It would be just the local worker.
Thank you.
And I believe that's all I have for questions to answer right now. I'm happy to take additional if there are any.
I was just thinking that we're talking about this lack of housing, over 8,000 units. And a couple of years ago, I believe it was State Line was talking about putting a moratorium on their short-term rentals for the very same reason. Did they ever impose a moratorium on them, or do you have any idea whether they've improved on their housing needs, or?
I do not have that info.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say.
That's okay. More theoretical, I suppose, than anything else, unless
Actually,
Nikki, you have some information.
I think that's an excellent question, and they do have some data on that. I think at South Lake Tahoe, they did do a moratorium, and they didn't see the turnover they were expecting because so many of our second homeowners want to use their homes part of the year. And so you didn't see that transition. But I do think they were tracking how many went to long-term rentals versus just came off the market.
Right. Okay, well, that's a stab in the dark. Anyway, any other questions, concerns by the board members? Thank you all again for a great presentation, and program is, you know, it sounds great. So wish you the best of luck in the future of this.
Thank you very much.
So I think that concludes, does that conclude our, oh, we do have to close. I'm going to hand it over to County Council.
The board will now turn to closed session to consider 2 items of anticipated litigation.
Okay, we shall see you after that. Welcome back to our board meeting. We just returned from closed session, and I'm going to hand it over to County Council.
The board met in closed session to consider 2 potential cases under anticipated litigation. The board heard a report, the board provided direction, and is elected to continue both items till tomorrow's closed session, that being tomorrow, August the 27th. That concludes the report out of closed session.
Okay, if there's nothing further to come before the board here today, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.